If you would be so kind as, let me see if I can get the chat window back up over here. Just let us know where you're from. And just in case we're not only drawing from Greater Ontario, excuse me, Greater Toronto. God, I sounded like an American right there, didn't I? I'd like to see just, if you're being passive or if you're wanting to engage, whether that's through the chat or to sound off, no need to turn your camera on if you don't want to. It's 7 p.m. I get that. Fantastic. All right. Thunder Bay and Toronto. We've got an Ottawa representation, Orleans. Okay. And for those that it applies to east of Toronto, I have been studying French on Duolingo this past year. So when I see a French name in the list here, I'm getting kind of excited, though I would be completely exposing myself as just a Duolingo French speaker if I tried to engage. Solid. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to call you the anchor right there with your reference to limestone. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. This is great. It's peculiar. Even 4 or 5 years into normalizing this sort of way to engage a community of practice and to share what we've learned with each other. And I hope today is no different. I'm going to stick to the script now. I tried to do this to keep myself responsible. So I'm going to share my screen, go to my slide deck, pop it up here, and I'm going to follow my notes. I've got this introduction here to level set, and not knowing any of you personally, I want to make sure that I'm doing my best to try to throw my arms around everybody and meet them wherever they are in this journey of exploring and possibly implementing generative AI, at least into their own routines, if not being a leader and sharing what you've learned as a way to recover productivity for everybody else. And I'm already off the script. I should just trust what I've written. So welcome to Automating the Mundane and Liberating the People, Generative AI Productivity Hacks for Professional Educators. Are we ready to roll? Can I just get someone to say yes in the chat?
Ready.
All right. Hey, a verbal. I like that. Hi. Thanks for chatting.
All set.
Wonderful. Okay. So I've been educated that this is a tradition and I love it. So I'm going to do a land acknowledgement based on where I stand here in Indianapolis, Indiana, not terribly far from the infamous racetrack. But I want to acknowledge that track and everything else here is on land that was prior occupied by the Kickapoo, Miami, Potawatomi, and Shawnee peoples, and that Indiana's statehood was dishonorable in taking this land from these native cultures and populations, as we all know. In the present, we honor with humility and gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it through generations, and we recognize the ongoing connection that indigenous communities have to this place and their contributions to the life and culture of Indiana. We will give others just a second or two more. I think we're all here. I think I've done a good enough job. Just quickly about myself. Former English teacher. My name's Eric Nentrup. I was also a blended learning administrator after 4 years teaching. I transitioned as in midlife, and I know you're questioning that decision, but I have found my people and my path in education, and I'm so happy to be this far into it. I'm now an independent consultant with Advanced Learning Partners, where I support understanding of emerging technologies. I help design professional learning experiences. And one thing that's been really particularly enjoyable for me is helping frontline educators tell their stories about innovative learning. And I do that because my first career was in multimedia writing and producing content for corporate clients. And now I'm using those skills explicitly within education for short documentaries, as well as written publications of all different types for learning organizations, ed tech companies, and other clients such as the U.S. Department of Education, as long as they continue to exist. So we'll just, keep an eye on that one. And if anybody, sees a value in having me across the border, I'm not that terribly far away in Indiana. I want to give a quick disclaimer that any of the tools we cover today in this webinar may or may not be approved for local use. I'm not going to read the rest of that slide to you, but one more time here in a couple slides, I'm going to say, let's just proceed with caution. But it has to be said, I don't want us to presume that any and all applications out there are worth experimenting with our own data, let alone that of the students in our employ. So I want to start with sort of an icebreaker, and feel free to write this in the chat. But if someone feels inclined to speak up, like I said, I'd rather this be a conversation. So the question on the screen, you've answered where you're from. How'd you get where you are? And I kind of mean that in terms of what's your trajectory? Did you start like I did when I made the transition in education as a classroom teacher, noticed a penchant for how technology can be used to further mission and find yourself kind of moving that way in your education profession? Or have you stayed the course and been faithful to your post at the chalk face for all of these years? And during which time, I want to know if there's any example of technology taking your breath away. Would anybody like to respond to that because they felt that impulse? So when the questions came up on the screen? While you think, and I offer you wait time, I'll fill the dead air with my own story to lead by example and to make the most of the time. For me, I remember discovering a student with previously undiagnosed dyslexia, and that he could benefit from a reading app that would cycle the next word in sequence into the center of the screen through a bit of a peephole. I do not remember the app. It was years ago now. But he found this and he showed me that he was able to like keep his eyes stationary while the words passed by. And all I could think was, you can't do that with paper. And it made me realize that, written language from the top to the bottom of the page, left to right, in most languages, is a technology and a standard and a convention that was agreed upon without like all the committees that we have today. And it was not a one size fits all. So to see the ability of an iPad to help this student read fluently was just mind blowing to me. All right, Tom. I don't know if I'm going to teach you anything today on Notebook LM since you're already using it, but hopefully other people are it's fresh for some other people. If anybody doesn't have the chat open, I encourage you to do so to see what Tom just shared. But he said that it amazed him because he saw the benefits of experiential learning in the 1990s as students discovered multimedia computers and all were on task and motivated. 100%. I don't think any of us are beyond, making all sorts of compromises for the sake of engagement, if that makes sense. I love that. Thanks, Tom. Anyone else want to chat in with a time where technology took your breath away? And yes, this is a leading question. No one else? Hi, Deborah. ESL teacher here. ChatGPT is pretty darn breathtaking. I can't agree more. Yes, Deborah. We have Deborah, and Deborah. Ms. Shannon, Ms. Patterson, we've got ChatGPT getting the props here. Yes, its ability to immediately write questions for novel studies for 7 different novels. You already get what I'm getting at. I love this. Okay. So I think we all know that AI is everywhere and overwhelming. It is, I'll use a Canadian sports reference here, it has gone like a hockey stick up in the last 2 years. We know this. And whether that's standalone platforms like ChatGPT, a chatbot built on top of a large language model, or if it's watching our familiar tools roll out features of AI inside. I think of it like a major and a minor, right? So if you're a dedicated new tool that is all about AI, the major is, that user experience with a large language model and subsequently other models that are in the pipeline and coming very soon. But if it's the other way around, where it's like, hey, I've been using Google Docs for years, it's like the minor that now Gemini is within and can help me move forward. Even though, both Deborah and Deborah, like me, have probably gotten pretty quick with copying and pasting out of ChatGPT or other chatbots into the word processor. It's nice to not have to do that, and why I've chosen Gemini over ChatGPT for sort of my tasky kind of things that I need to get done. Is anybody, maybe the easiest thing to say, is anybody attending today because they don't use AI at all? Is everybody on this call a current user of AI? I'm going to presume probably more so than not, since we're seeing some evidence in the chat. Okay. Oh, all right, Michael. Thank you. Melanie. Okay. Lori, Julie, Deborah again. Okay. We might be a little bit all over the map, and that's cool. I think it's pretty typical. I think it's a typical sample size that we're all using it one way or the other. But what I want to get at here is sort of the level set and to move towards these things. Like I said, I'd like to blaze through this stuff, but it feels foundational to me, and I don't want to take anything for granted. We know AI is here to stay, but aside from being a tool, aside from using the tool safely, it's also something in which professional educators can be benefiting from. Because I don't know about you, when I left district life a few years ago, I already was feeling like the job was demanding 10 pounds of potatoes out of the 5-pound sack that I was afforded. And I started thinking about ways that before ChatGPT dropped of how we could do things differently in schools. And for whatever reason, we seem to be the later adopters of certain things. And I think it's incumbent upon us to not let that happen with this paradigm shift. All right. So one more question to this end, just so I can see some more feedback from you as we get moving. What I just said, the experiences that I had when I was on that side of the fence and feeling like I just don't have enough resources to get, I don't have enough time in the day to get everything done. And there are so many tasks that are repetitive and rules-based, objective, pattern-based, something that should be able to delegate to software. Does that sound accurate to your lived experience as an educator? And if so, can you give any examples? Glancing over here, I just seen earlier, Nikki wrote, using AI to develop test and assignment questions. Okay. Lori, we're going to get there. I imagine we're all here for that purpose. Early alert reports for students at risk. Deborah, I might have to ask you some follow-up questions on that one for another project I'm working on. But I would be curious to learn more about how you are getting sort of an early warning system out of some AI and how much of that's, based on what you've made versus what you're using from a feature in a tool. Oh, that's what you want. Okay. Cool. We're going to actually kind of scratch the surface of that one here in one of the examples. All right. You are a dreamer, and I love it that you are. Okay. Deborah says, so accurate. The fact that my brain can't even think of an example due to fatigue means I need to learn something here. You and me both, sister. And Paul, absolutely. I'm excited to explore AI tools, how AI tools can give educators more time to support and engage with students by automating mundane and administrative tasks. Okay, this is not on the slide, but I want to say that it's one thing that I have seen over the last few years. We've got to just divide it into two hemispheres. What are we doing for productivity, and whether that's personal productivity or corporate productivity, that helps us just operate more efficiently, more leanly, and recover time more than anything else, but also maybe recovering money. So, administrators that are watching the budget can ponder that. On the other side, we think about how we are doing it to not just operate our school districts, but to execute mission. Like, how are we actually affecting teaching and learning with these new tools? So to me, whenever something new comes up and it has this great promise, I ask myself, what camp does it belong into? Whether it's specifically ed tech or something from general mainstream media that can be applied to working as an education professional. So I'm giving you hints as to my disposition and how I'm, swimming in the fire hose, so to speak. And part of that is also choosing not to, is to just have some focus and learn something well and stay focused on a particular problem statement, not learning every feature of a particular app. All right, back to the script. So in spite of a decade of Siri and Alexa, we're still adjusting to the post-ChatGPT era. We've all heard the common references to AI components in our lives that we've already become reliant upon. Things like how machine learning has given us recommendation engines for shopping and entertainment, directions via GPS, and routing that actual itinerary. And anything, it seems to me like right now that was derived or came about and we got used to before ChatGPT's release was just like, it feels quaint to me. Do you have a similar experience? Like, I'm used to these sorts of machine learning experiences, but there's something different as of the past couple of years. And you consider that a rhetorical question. It's begging the obvious answer that we're all experiencing this paradigm shift. And pardon, yes. And for me, one of the big hinge points when I did the research early on for some of the work that I've done for the US Department of Education, it's like the crux really is this advent of natural language processing above and beyond what we experienced telling Siri or Alexa what we need or want. And I think about natural language processing going next level by way of the large language models themselves, and how it took time to develop enough data points, parameters, values, all of the engineering speak, such that when you plug in a query, you get a response back that sounds natural. And that's been in development for years, from what I've witnessed and experienced in the work that I've done researching publications. And it's still a novel experience for us all. Like I said, like I asked earlier about being impressed by something we've seen by way of technology. I'm still astounded. I have moments, even though I'm used to it, with the chatbots that I work with, where I suspect there's a person on the other side, and I caught them. But whether it's those profound kind of responses to my queries and prompts that I put in, to other examples of the kind of images that can be generated, like we're getting accustomed to it. But for me, the novelty of an image, of a static still image, wore off when I saw OpenAI's Sora and some of the video examples that have been coming out. They terrified me. Did anybody else have that experience when earlier this year OpenAI showed some of these examples of the puppies playing in the snow and so forth? Or everybody has seen, examples of Will Smith eating spaghetti, but that doesn't really faze me. It's the things that look photorealistic that aren't, until you see a fifth leg on a puppy or a third arm on a human. Have you seen Sora? I'm not going to go into that tangent too much, but the point is that, like, from ChatGPT to Sora, that sort of uncanny valley dumbfounding experience of this paradigm shift has shown me that it's not done impressing me. So point being, expect more mind-blowing things to come, because it's just a safer disposition than not. maybe it's peaked out and leveled out. The point is, we don't really know, but I really do expect, because the agents themselves are going to be getting more involved, to be impressed with that. And this is different than what we've become accustomed to so far when we engage with devices that aren't quite as smart. That's because there was a major crossing of the Rubicon with generative AI. When ChatGPT dropped and everybody raced to close the gap to compete with them, OpenAI is separate from Google and Microsoft and the other players in the game. And this completely rearranged everybody's priorities in business when it came to technology that involved artificial intelligence. So natural language processing, for me, to just tie a bow on it, has been a very interesting thing to pay attention to, as it makes a very reliable bridge between us and the technology that we're using on the regular. So let's bring it home a little bit more. I presume one of these three, if not all three brands on this screen right now, are familiar to everybody on this call. Is anybody using any of these by chance? Conmigo, Magic School, or Brisk? Whether you're doing it personally or you've invested? Okay, Julie says no. Okay. Tom says yes to Brisk. Okay. Any other yeses? No, kidding. Caitlin. Caitlin, can you expound on that? Are you exploring them, or has your district, if that applies, invested in all three?
So I am a digital learning specialist in my district, and I've been training our teachers on many tools, including these three.
Okay.
Probably the most is Magic School, and our district is in talks with Magic School to possibly get a district license for it, because it's probably the most robust. And then as far as like the student side, being able to use that tool with students could be really, really helpful.
For sure. For sure. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Tom says he has 2,500 staff members using Brisk over the first 2 months of this school year. It's their #1 licensed tool, along with School.ai and Quizzes. I'm inferring this, Tom, but it sounds to me like there's no going back. Great. I hope there's evidence in the data. Oh, man, I didn't mean for that to sound like something Dave Letterman would say, but I am in Indianapolis, where he grew up. Please, you know what? Michael just asked a question, and I'm not going to know the answer to some of these questions. And I presume that's directed at Tom. Please feel free to have a conversation over here and check back in with me. I'll keep running my mouth, but I'll say something that catches your attention most likely. But otherwise, if you have something if you make a connection over here and can share something useful, I'm going to keep looking over here to scan, but I'm going to also keep an eye on the clock, because I've got some things to show you, and would rather get to those soon. But I will keep looking over there, because I've got FOMO, and I don't want to miss out on any really salient points over there. Those of you who are on the front lines are going to know more tactically than I do, but I've spent so much time on the thought leadership side. I want to make sure that I tried my best to trickle that down and bridge the gap between non-regulatory guidance and practicing educators. All right, so okay, I think the best place to start, if you don't have access to these, is with what you already have. And of course, you guys have seen that, like I said, in the majors to minors comparison, that there are already these tools that are in our systems. And I feel like in preparing my slides and not considering what might already transpire in the chat, this question might be a little bit of a little redundant at this point. So if you want to sound off in the chat, I'm going to show you a tool that I've been using. Has anybody used Pi? Anybody familiar with Pi? I seem to be the person who introduces people to Pi. So let me figure out how to share that particular window real fast. And see if I can tease it out of my tiles. Okay. So, all right, everybody can see that I logged into Pi right before this session and I asked it a question. I was just being vulnerable with Pi. I'm about to present. I'm a little nervous. And Pi comes back with this amazing bit of support and encouragement. Over here on the left, you see other threads that I have open, and some of them are a mile long. But I have found, after using ChatGPT a bunch, and then dabbling with the other chatbots, that I need different chatbots, just like I need different friends. I need different colleagues. I need different people in my life that I rely upon for services, whether it's personal or professional. And I feel like what I'm figuring out is that I can slot different chatbots into those different roles that are available all the time. They never get tired of me running my mouth or asking follow-up questions or not being polite and just changing the subject. I'm not rude to them. I show lots of gratitude to these. The way I have noticed that my symbiotic relationship with technology has evolved in the last couple of years. I just treat Pi like I would, a therapist. A friend. I tell it all sorts of things. I ask it all sorts of questions, and I have found that that particular app is really useful to me when I use the app on my phone and just rely upon voice to text, and it just lets me vent and think out loud. And I'll ask it to remind me of things. I'll ask it to organize and then retrieve content later. But primarily what I'm looking for is empathy and somebody to listen. And Caitlin said she didn't. I know the Pi seems to be a sleeper out there. And it's probably because it's very right brain, very heart, not head. And whereas people just want to get to ChatGPT and say, write me an email. So experiment with Pi, but more so, like I said earlier, I'm more interested in not teaching you a specific app today, but to get you to think about the dispositions that have evolved for myself and how I'm really convicted that as education leaders, we need to be presenting opportunities for all roles to be able to respond to whatever comes next, given how volatile everything is. So I've got to get back to my slide deck here real fast. And so to that end, I find a lot of value in recognizing these different tools have different personalities. And the more I think about them as people, the less I think about them as, electronics or, even lesser sophisticated tools that I don't have a relationship with. And the reason I think that's important is for so long, all of us have endured this swing towards STEM and how important coding is, only to find out that AI is going to do a better job coding than any person is. And in fact, a lot of developers are already very, very, very dependent upon first drafts, if not bug checking from these sorts of tools. So moving forward, I've learned a few things in this pursuit. And I want to share them with you in case they're helpful. And the first one is that you just can't steer a parked car. An old boss told me that, and it stuck with me. You can think of it as a way to hey, you don't know where you're going, but put the car in drive. And then you've already started this process towards your destination. If you're on the lagging end of the continuum on the call today and you find yourself not experimenting, start with Pi. It's so warm. I have had, in fact, I remember a buddy who's a developer early on said he found that ChatGPT helped him have a better conversation with his young adult daughter. And I'm like, this guy is capable of writing software for AI use, but he is using this technology for his personal life and gaining immense benefits from it by fortifying his relationship with his daughter. And I thought, there's no better testimony than that. So experiment and find some value, even if it doesn't directly affect your productivity yet. It will if you get moving. The second way to interpret that you can't steer a parked car is to think about those tasks that take the most out of you and demand the most of you, and know if not trust or expect that AI is going to get the task moving so that you can save energy to just give direction. You can navigate while it drives. So moving on to the other bullets, I'll go a little bit more quickly here. Steve Jobs' wardrobe choices and decision fatigue. If you're not familiar with this, it stuck with me forever, long past his death. But the black mock turtleneck and the jeans and the New Balance shoes every day meant that he didn't have to think in the morning and expend mental energy on what he was going to wear that day. I think that's a pretty universal story at this point. But as educators with scant resources, you need to make some deliberate decisions to preserve energy. And what that could look like relates to another metaphor that I used to use with my own teachers, which is that we all need dental hygienists or sous chefs. Like we need support to take care of the stuff that happens every day that doesn't require a whole lot of discernment, so that we save our energy for the 49% decisions. And if not just the more luxurious ones of building rapport with students, getting to know them intimately, and watching them grow over time based on the way that you kind of guide them and let them struggle and support them when they need it. So think about that. We got to get moving. You got to preserve some energy, and you might as well start to learn how to delegate. And another thing that came right to mind as I was working on this list is that nobody's an expert. We have people who are figuring this out, but this is a new paradigm shift, and it is like the classical learnings that will eventually emerge for this era have not been calcified yet. They're not cemented yet. It's still wet paint. So I want to make sure that you stay shrewd but optimistic as you venture forth and try new tools or new approaches. And I'll make sure that I've got the chat up here in case I'm missing you guys, but I don't see where it went. Oh, found it again. Coming up for air really quickly. All right, Caitlin, I will come back to you here in a second. So the fact that this is a moving target and constantly moving, you just need to know which direction it's moving towards. And that is towards artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence. OpenAI is very forthright in that being their goal. And it's beyond the scope of this conversation, just as much as really digging into the presumption that we want to do things that are ethically right for students. We want to pay attention to equity issues and all of that. We also need to pay attention to the fact that these developers are charting a course in that direction. Does anybody need anything more about artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence relative to where we are today? I don't want it to be a distraction, but I also don't want it to be a presumption. We good? You can ask Pi about it. So I'm having fun if you can't tell. As such, when we think about, actually, I think I've got one more bullet here. Yes, the other thing that's blowing my mind, I saw this coming a few years ago, and it's just started to make the headlines, which caught me off guard. I thought this was already a thing, which is that the tools are self-improving. They know, they do surgery on themselves. They do professional develop on themselves. If not ChatGPT now, the Orion model probably will. I don't know that for sure, but with each iteration, each consecutive model, it's getting closer and closer to that, and they move very quickly. So that hockey stick is just going to be the metaphor from here on out. And the experts and those that have sort of a religious fervor towards artificial intelligence, to the idea of Kurzweil's singularity, if you're familiar, they want this to happen, and there's too much on the line to gain for it not to. So I think it's safe to expect that we're going to continue to charge towards that, much like other big goals like making it to the moon. Any reactions so far to those things on those lists? Those are just observations on my part or deductions that I've found over the last 3 years, particularly. Please sound off in the chat, and I'll give you a chance to do so and catch up to what Caitlin said here. She says that different tools for different needs. Yes, I agree. I have come and gone on Perplexity and Claude too. And some of it's just a bandwidth thing. Like I've got my needs met right now. And so those other tools, I'll wait till the next iteration, and then I'll give them I'll kick the tires again. I made an Are You a Federalist or an Unfederalist quiz for social studies students in 3 minutes the other day. High five, Caitlin. Love it. All right. A couple more things. LLMs are now commonplace and advancing quickly. But as I see stories about robots emerging, just prepare yourselves for this. Learning behavior models are coming, and that makes devices able to operate in the physical world. But again, think about the difference between just ChatGPT and Sora and what's able to be churned out there. I also want to underscore just the investment, and you've probably seen plenty of headlines in this regard, so I'm not going to belabor that. And I've alluded to how much guidance is out there. We're going to come back to that in a second. But don't forget that the experts aren't that far ahead of you. And unless you work at OpenAI or an AI scientist yourself, most end users are not getting left too far behind, but you will be. So my urge is to stay informed at very least and actually be a practitioner, not just a spectator, to the extent that you're comfortable. But that gap's going to increase very quickly, I think, in the next 2 to 5 years. So as a facilitator, my goal is to provide you with some entry points or some on-ramps. Here are 2 objectives: to recognize and to apply. That's it. Okay. So I'm about to show you some examples and meet you where you are. And I'm going to solicit some feedback in the chat with like, hey, this is too basic, or this is, hey, you're making some magical leaps. And I need to call a timeout and ask you how you got from point A to point D, because I don't see B and C. So whether you're feeling like this is not worth your time, let me know. Or if you're feeling like I'm presuming a few things, first time I've given this talk, and I'm not so sure if these exercises apply yet, but at least they give you a vantage point and a disposition to apply to your own work. That's the goal. Are we ready? Indeed we are. Okay. So one more disclaimer. I just can't emphasize this enough to say shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. Protect your personal identifiable information from these models. And just keep in mind that you are when you are uploading information to these, that you may be doing so without knowing who owns the data and what they're doing with it, like training the model. But we have plenty of legislation, regardless of what country it is, we have plenty of legislation about how we have to protect this, and that we do so, we experiment with all other safety and ethics concerns applied. So I've said it, it's on the screen. Let's move forward. Okay, so we're going to start small and snowball in all the ways that we experiment. I've just used this as a professional learning philosophy for the last 15 years. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You'll stall out and you'll never get anywhere. Start somewhere that's reasonable and just continually expand, kind of like going to the gym and increasing the weight that you lift. But the phrase that for the title of this came from Jim Kinney, an IT professional here in Greater Indianapolis. Back in 2010, I met the guy on a project-based learning approach where he was providing both internships as well as some opportunities for projects nearby our high school. And it applied to me then, and it applies and sounds even more prophetic to me now, because it doesn't apply just to technologists. It applies to everybody that uses technology. And in our lifetimes, we've basically arrived at a time where we're straddling a paradigm shift where we've witnessed the outgoing, I'm not that tech savvy disposition to, you have to be tech savvy as sort of a professionalism basics. So just remember to stay focused on relationships and the sheer satisfaction of participating in learning, no matter what you entail, and we'll be fine from there. I'm going to give you the slide deck and leave this for you, given how much time we have left. The examples don't take long, and I've felt like I've just needed to lean heavy on theory besides application here. But if you're a leader and you're saying, hey, if I can bolster some foundational competencies, I would put them in one of these 4 categories, and I may not be right. But I did push Gemini pretty hard to get this list dialed into where it is. And I agree with this list based on the experiences that I've had across the different roles in education that I've served and the hundreds of school districts that I've had the privilege of visiting and working consultatively with over the last decade. But essentially, the more that we can backfill some of these things, some of these areas, not just from like a formal computer science perspective, but just having the understanding of the vernacular for what it means to manage data, or to understand the interlinkages between the Google ecosystem or the Microsoft ecosystem, or how to use third-party tools to bridge two different data sources, like the more opportunities it's going to afford for you. And these are not, again, specific to training on a particular tool. But if you have these in your employ and you're comfortable with technology in this way, I'm sure Caitlin, others here who have exhibited like some deep investment in digital learning, can just migrate to the next one. No different than like if you learn Spanish, learning French is easier. Just the Romantic languages have enough in common, and so do the binary ones too. So I can admit that I, as a writer, was very much ego affected by chatbots and the suggestion that you're not going to be able to or have to write like you used to. But my grandpa taught me that if you can drive a stick, you can drive an automatic, and that's been my disposition. But I went for a couple of rides in a Waymo self-driving taxi in Phoenix this past winter, and now I'm realizing I've been wasting my time relying upon my ability to conquer the blank page as a writer, no differently than my ability to navigate traffic quickly to the grocery store. I'd rather a robot do that while I read a story on my phone in the backseat, and so I think what I'm getting at is my realization that some of my own stubbornness has to do with the skills that I've invested in, and not recognizing that, hey, I get the chance to not be the dental hygienist anymore. I get promoted to the dentist and he makes more money. And I don't know how many legs that particular metaphor has, but particularly I have to make these changes because I can go further by not spending energy on the things that I value more. So we're going to take a look at just the classic Google Workspace that many of us are familiar with, but now with robots. Others have said that they've dabbled with Notebook and Gemini. And what we're going to do is take three examples for the time that we have left and just quickly blaze through these, because I would like to leave a little bit of time at the end for some conversation. But the three categories here, we're going to start first and foremost by talking about automating routine communication and documentation. I feel like I can save time and skip this particular one. And go to the next two, which I think are far more valuable and a little bit more esoteric. But essentially, sound off here in the chat if you are not using a large language model of any sort, ChatGPT, Pi, Claude, Copilot, to get a first draft of an email. And let me know if that's useful to start here, or if you'd rather see some of the kind of the junior varsity and varsity examples. And the reason I say that is I don't want to presume that everybody's not figure this part out, but you're going to have these slides, and I'm happy to stay in contact with you after this event. Michael says he's not. Okay, only using AI in things like Photoshop. Okay, let's move forward. Let's blaze through this one. This one's easy, but I'm just running my mouth too long. All right, so we talk about this is the steering the car thing. Like, why write from scratch that tedious email for the umpteenth time? You can save it as a template in Google, in Gmail, of course. But what if it could write a better chunk of copy than you? So what we're going to talk about here real fast is this idea of writing in Gemini. Let me share that screen. I find the right tab here. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So, you can use ChatGPT for this as well. I just love this because of the one feature at the bottom that I'll show you that's not in ChatGPT. And I'm not starting from scratch. I've already programmed it. I've already done my prompt, and I asked it this question: Can you make me a Google form for parents to stay current by periodically updating their demographic information for the school's student information system? So I tried to be as explicit in my prompt to reduce the number of iterations that I needed. And I was happy with this template that spit out right off the bat. It broke it down into several sections, as you see here. And it may not be the most accurate way that you would go about soliciting information in 2024 from the field to have an updated database. But if you don't have tools that allow you to send out those sorts of forms to your parents like that, you might have to roll your own, or another use case that's similar to this. But the point being, I didn't have to think through everything that I'd want to include. I just have to go back and look at this draft from Gemini as to what to call it, what description to use, and how to build out different sections to make it not just organized, but a better user experience for the person filling out the form. Then I was disappointed because I wanted to be able to hit the share button at the bottom and export it to Google Forms, and it wasn't there. But my experience tells me it's just not there yet. So at some point, they're going to want this parity across all the other tools. So if I say, create me this form, it's going to skip this step. I can presume it's going to skip this step and go straight to this next tab and show me this form. Now, I just copied and pasted that over, which before we would just stare at the blank form and fill it out manually ourselves. So I didn't really appreciate that, but it was just an ironic, tedious step where I had to do a little bit of copying and pasting. But if you look here at this form, it saved me all sorts of time because I could just copy and paste it over, choose the right sort of response mechanism, whether it was multiple choice or short answer, and then gets to the heart of what I wanted to extend with Gemini. I presume Google Forms users are on the call here at some point, right? Yes, most people are familiar with Google Docs and to the point of using forms. Okay, Brent says, yep. Michael, okay, great. Do you know it links to a spreadsheet on the back end? I don't want to presume that that's universal knowledge either. Yes, Tina says, okay. Okay, so we've got this Google Sheets on the back end. Now, this is an empty form, but you can imagine sending it out to all your guardians and getting data back. And you would end up with a spreadsheet very similar to this. Now, this is anonymized. This is sample student data. It's not real. It's synthetic. But I was thinking about, like, if I ran a report out of my student information system and said, I want, the template for basic demographic information, but please also include maybe latitude and longitude for where they are, because I want to make a map out of it. We're not doing that today, but I might also want their grades across the 4 core academic areas. And this also had some other things in here. I'm not even really sure what they were from this sample data, but this is what I thought was really cool. Let's move this over here. There it is. Okay. So within Google Sheets now, I've activated a Gemini account, and I can pop this open because I've just got this table of data, and I get a little, bleary-eyed staring at it, trying to make sense of it and interpret it. But here I can have it do some interpretation for me. And so presuming that I'd asked a bunch of questions on a survey, and it's taken a look at the data, and it's analyzing it for me, but it's also sort of like nudging me to create a formula or how to use conditional formatting and such to make this data more legible. So I did a sample earlier where I asked it to build me a formula that compared the nationality of all the students, and I put it over here. And then I asked a second follow-up question, which was, can you build a table to visualize, or a graph to visualize where everybody's from? And it's not the most elegant, but it took me very few moments to conjure up this table just by following the prompts over here. I had no agenda going into this data set. I got overwhelmed by it, like all of us have done looking at raw data. And I just followed some of the prompts that Gemini is putting on the side and realized at least one question I wanted to query the data about. And that led me to wondering about what the nationality breakdown was, and just to see even in total, how many nationalities are represented in this survey that I sent out to the entire list of guardians. Yes, to reiterate that, Paul, in my not steering the car and experimenting, I ran into this presumption that it would kick it out over to Google Forms, because I've dozens of times kicked out responses from Gemini over to a fresh Google Doc. I'm just addicted to that convenience. Justin, I think you need to activate the advanced feature. But now that I can't go back to verify that for you, or maybe I could if I logged out and logged in with a different Google account. This is where Gemini as a sidecar is really interesting to me, because the number of times I'm just staring at the screen thinking about what my next step is for writing a sentence or a paragraph or moving some data around in a spreadsheet. I like how it's making me think. It's offering me some suggestions, and I just have to stay alert to realize that I might have a different agenda for what I was about to do, and I don't need to get distracted by its presumptions based on the raw data. Okay, Melanie said, just verified. Thank you. Appreciate you saying so. Okay. So the point for me, though, is the point to drive home is it starts off with needing to get information back from a bunch of different people, but then you're volunteering for the work that goes into dealing with the data once you get past the form. I like Google Forms just simply because once it's in a spreadsheet, and I've just been using Google Sheets forever, that I'm happy to write or edit formulas or to use many of the tools that pre-existed Gemini within Google Sheets. But adding Gemini to it, like I said, it invites someone else in to look over my shoulder and help me to figure out value that I wasn't initially aware of because I had my own agenda. I was trying to get certain things out of it, but maybe wasn't aware that that same data set had even more information in it that could be valuable. Okay. That's that quick example. And again, the point being to take the use case from gathering information and analyzing it and turning it into a visualization quickly and saving yourself time is the goal. Now, where are we next? Okay. I'm in too many tabs purgatory at the moment. Is that right? So back to my slides and the next example. Are you seeing my slides? Cool. All right, there we go. That's right that time. Okay. So the next example I wanted to show you, and I feel like this is a little disjointed, but I apologize. I know I don't have much time left. So I'm going to split the last 12 minutes between these two and hopefully get them done faster than in enough time. And again, this is going to be recorded for you to review. You'll have my slide deck. But for who is using Notebook LM? And why does the chat disappear every time I switch back? Okay. Tom, that was you that said earlier that you'd use Notebook. Okay. All right. So what I want to talk about real fast is streamlining professional development. And that means like taking a ton of data so that you're of reports and publications so that you are sure that what you're presenting has some backings, has some evidence behind it, that it's tailored, that it could be personalized, and then it can be continuous and ongoing. And Notebook can handle all of this, which I think is incredibly powerful. And so what that looks like, I feel like can I just share everything here? Desktop 2.
This is actually like really cool.
What's that?
Just an AI presentation.
That encouraged me.
Much to do. I just don't.
Whoever just told their partner. I like that. All right. I think I got the green box. I think you're seeing this. So you can go to notebooklm.google, just search Notebook LM. And they have all sorts of an overview on the front website. But once you sign in and have access to your own account, you can create different topical notebooks for all sorts of things. I'm going to dive into this one, which I've pre-populated with a bunch of documents that I've been involved with and plenty that I haven't. So 50-50. So I've got a bunch of guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. I've co-authored 4 different reports that are released on the Department of Education's Education Technology website. And I've also worked with ISTE on a couple of things. But I started playing around with what it would mean to plan some professional development on just high-level guidance. No, not terribly different. Lori, I think that's great. Have him take a seat. But I wanted to see what I could do to quickly turn this around in terms of, hey, I want to have a session for generative AI with my crew, but I don't want it to be, cherry picking things that I find on websites myself. I'd rather take some documents that I know have had a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into them and see if I can distill them down into something digestible. So I started playing around with these different notes that you see here. And the way that I learned to do that, what I'm about to show you is I started with this guide here and it gave me prompts. So I uploaded, I guess step 1 is upload all your documents. And then step 2 is to follow the prompts in the guide to start to build some notes. And similar to what we just saw there are suggested, saw in the prior example, there are suggested questions. And for those paying attention, yes, there's an audio overview functionality here that will use AI voices to create a deep dive conversation that you can just listen to. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I just get sick and tired of sitting in front of the computer and webcam, and I want to be productive, and I go for a walk and just listen to things on my iPhone. And having the ability to do this would be incredibly important to me as an education leader, where I can say, hey, the Department of Education's released all these documents, or OECM's come out with a list of resources that they've curated, but I need to move quickly and try to get something going fast. I'm going to start there. I'm going to follow one of the suggested questions after reading the summary that it's given me. And oh my gosh, this is exactly where I want to go next. I need to create some professional development. So I want to come up with a study guide, and it's going to create a new note and take all these documents and organize it from a kind of a research perspective into an abstracted note that you can use as it's still building it. I'll show you one that I've already done. There it went. Okay, cool. And so it says that from the ISTE AI guides, it's found some material to generate a short answer quiz here. And it shows you the questions and gives you the answer key, as well as a list of essay questions. And I feel like this would be something I would use with maybe if I was teaching I don't know, an education policy course, an undergrad or maybe even a graduate level policy course. But it gives you everything that you need for a study guide here, and you can use that, for yourself, like you would making your own flashcards back in the day, or you could go one step further and turn that into a rich piece of media. Caitlin just said one team of teachers uploaded everything that they used for one unit, created a bunch of materials, the students to use. And I say, if I was in the classroom today still, I would be using Notebook LM like mad. 18 plus for sure. And again, under the other umbrella of all the safety concerns that we're talking about. But like if I was in higher ed, I'd use that with my students. But yeah, the thing is that you can throw anything at it and say, hey, just break this down for me. And then you can make some educated decisions about where to go next. I was following some of these prompts because I wanted to see what it came up with. And so it took all these documents and it came up with a list of key insights and next steps from one prompt. From another,
Eric, I just have a question about when you upload documents, does it matter what format they're in? Can they be in Google Docs or in Word doc, or does it matter what doc they come from?
It does matter. Let me see if I can find the quick of it right here. It tells you. Yeah, there you go. So PDF text, plain text, Markdown, which is it's a plain text format if you're not familiar, but you can also upload audio files. So if you find an MP3 or know how to extract one that's buried on a website, embedded on a website, you could have it take care of that too. I've been using other tools for transcribing audio, but knowing that Notebook does it and that I do 90% of my work within Google Docs and spreadsheets. So I would lean on that for even processing other stuff. Oh, the other thing that's cool is that you can reference things that are already in your Google Drive. So if you've worked hard to come up with a whole bunch of materials for common assessments, you could upload those as well and say, cut these a different way for me so that I have a fresh quiz, a fresh test, or or convert this to a real life learning experience and shift learning modalities. It can take YouTube links because YouTube's a Google property. It takes URLs and it can scrape websites. And yeah, anywhere that you can get something on your clipboard, you can paste it into. This is a tool that I think I'm going to be using more and more, and would advise the same for those working in education to focus on professional learning. But that's it for me with Notebook LM. If you want to learn more, though, I have a great buddy named Matt Miller, known for his book, Ditch That Textbook, that I have a link. I will include in a link to my with my slides. Desktop 2. And I think I've got that right there on that slide. I said it again, I'm in tab purgatory right now. Yes, so check out Matt Miller's work. You can search him, Ditch That Textbook, but the link's going to be in this slide once I save it and export it for you guys to reference later. And then we've got a few moments left, but this one's kind of interesting. Yes, I'm going to skip straight to the example itself. I confused myself on the last slide. So the thing that I in essence, we are inundated with data. We've got plenty of data. We're not getting the most out of it. And if you think about the example that I use with the generating a form to send home and the data back, I accidentally merged those two 1 and 3 into the same demo. But essentially, I've witnessed school districts doing everything that they can to visualize data, building data dashboards, whether they do it themselves using whatever hodgepodge of tools that they can pull out of the pantry, or buying something like Tableau, Microsoft BI. What's another one? Google Looker. I'm just getting familiar with that, but these tools that can take disparate pieces of data and give you basic layout tools for the browser to create, whatever visualizations that you want for whatever audience, whatever season that you're in, and so forth. Has anybody been using any of those tools in your own work to go beyond a spreadsheet or to an exported CSV file so that you can, find those trends yourself and what that entails in terms of, finance and time or talent? Checking over here. Matt Miller's great. Yeah, he is. Yes. I'll take that as a no. We're coming up on time here, but I want to leave a moment for any further consideration. Apologies for accidentally melding the two demos there. Again, first time I've done this. And yes, thank you for sharing that, Paul. And I'm glad, Paul, you got signed up. I hope you guys take advantage of that too. There's some other people in the slides that I'll share. But if you think along the lines of automating any of your just drafting of any language, and learning how to automate that and turn yourself into more of an editor or an English teacher, grading, not staring at the blank screen, that's one check mark. If you find ways as an education leader to streamline professional development by making it even more evidence-based, by including reports and research that are out there, using using Notebook LM to condense that, and then thirdly, enhancing data-driven decision-making by taking advantage of the fact that things like Google Sheets is integrated with Forms, and now have that the spreadsheet tabular data is available to Gemini for further parsing. I keep running into the limits of these systems as they are, but it's learning to, it's like once you know what those limits are, you can work within them and not get frustrated. And you can always look forward to the next iteration, which might come next week, next month, or next year. So don't forget to start small and snowball. Consider these other 4 bullets here at the end, but anything else as we wrap up time that you would like to say, or any final questions? Any thoughts? Paul, I'm glad to hear that. I had zero idea preparing whether or not I would find the mark or not, but I hope this starts more conversations than it completes. All right, thank you, everybody. Here's my information. If you'd like to get a hold of me, if you know how to get a hold of Dean, he knows how to get a hold of me, but I mean it whenever I present. I love engaging. I love following up. I love getting to know people who participated. So don't be a stranger. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.